morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Casualty 911 on 88.5 Soufriere FM. I am your host, Fawn Minviel. It's nice to be back after a short break. Louisa has been hosting for the past couple of shows, so it's good to be back in the seat as host. Thank you to all of our regular viewers for joining us on the program. To our new listeners, welcome. We hope that you will have a good experience with us today as we talk about two very important topics which is most likely to affect many of us in some way or the other. This morning, joining us is Miss Andrea Alcide of the Elderly Affairs Unit of the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and Elderly Affairs. You know, we talk about the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and Elderly Affairs, and it seems like we tend to focus so much on the Ministry of Health. There's actually an Elderly Affairs Unit, and Ms. Alcide will be talking to us about this unit, the Elderly Affairs Unit, telling us a little bit about the roles and responsibilities, what they hope to achieve, and so on. We will also be speaking about elder abuse, which Elder Abuse Day was observed on the 15th of June. So we will be talking also a bit about elder abuse, the different forms of elder abuse, how we can deal with it, the support systems in place, preparations that we can make in the event that we actually get to live to that ripe old age, what can be done to improve quality of life at that age. So welcome, Miss Andrea Alcide. Before we get into our topic, I would really love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
I am
I am
Andrea
Andrea
Alcide.
Alcide.
As our
As
host
our host
indicated,
indicated,
I am Program
Program
Development
Development
Officer within
Officer
the
within the
Ministry of
Ministry of
Health
Health,
Media
Media
Unit.
Unit.
I am a
I am a
social worker
social
by
worker by
profession
profession
and a
and a
gerontologist. A
gerontologist.
gerontologist is someone who
Someone who
studies
studies
the
the
effect of
effect
older
of older
persons,
person,
the
the
lifestyle of
lifestyle of
aging,
aging,
and
and
how we
how
can
we can
assist
assist
you better.
better.
Okay, wonderful. So we're having a little bit of an issue with the audio. We're having a little bit of an issue with the audio. So we will be working on that. And okay. No comments. So I was just saying that we were having a little bit of an issue with the audio. with the audio. Okay. So Miss Alcide,
I'm thinking it's on my end.
yes, but it's okay. We'll go ahead and see how we can work out how there's somebody helping in the background. So hopefully it will be sorted out without us having to break. So thank you. I actually did not know that you are a gerontologist. That's very interesting.
Yes, I am.
Since I'm meeting you for the first time, a virtual hello, and I
Hi.
I guess that would give you a very good perspective from which to speak about elder abuse and life in a certain age. Now let's start off by how we uh, describe or how we talk about people of a certain age. Okay, so sometimes
Yes.
we say old people, we say the elderly, guamoon, whatever it is. So, what is the most acceptable way to refer to people of? And you'll tell me at what age it starts at as well. What is the most
Yes.
acceptable term to use, and why other terms may not be as acceptable?
The internationally acclaimed term or word is older persons. In St. Lucia, we recognize older persons from age 65, which We go according to what our NIC mandate is. However, some of the other countries, they term older persons from age 55 and older, but we're 65 and older. For the elderly, you cannot call an older person who's 55 years elderly. They will take serious offense. Yeah? You can call them old adults, but you cannot call them the elderly. Like I said, the most appropriate term is older persons, which some persons still take offense by it, but that's the international claim word.
I'm starting at age 65 years.
Yes, for St. Lucia, 65. Like I said, some countries start at 55, but we start at 65.
Okay, wonderful. So older persons, I guess it takes a little getting used to when it's
Yeah.
so easy to just say, the elderly, and be done with that.
Because you're 65 and you're very agile, you can still work, you can still you have all of your faculties intact, your cognition, your mobility, and for somebody to call you elderly, then you take offense. Well, some persons take offense. So some are more comfortable with the older persons, and like I said, it's a universal too.
Okay. So I guess elderly gives the impression that the person is basically at home and able to do much.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. We'll try getting used to it. So,
Okay.
at the Elderly Affairs Unit, which we don't often hear about, can you tell us a little bit about the unit? When did you actually become like a formal unit? Or what are the roles and responsibilities? What is happening in the background as it relates to older persons within the
Mm.
Elderly Affairs Unit? Or
So the unit
older persons
claims.
unit?
Well, actually, some of our colleagues say the older persons unit, but no, it's the elderly affairs unit. And I like the fact that you said the older persons unit because the term elderly affairs sounds like something we could work on changing, right?
Exactly.
Right. So we officially it was following the instatement of the new ministries. However, last January 2024, my director came on board. He was the sole person in the unit, and I started in November last year. We're still pretty small. We don't have our full component of staffing yet, but we have a heavy load on our back because our unit, is supposed to be representing older persons around St. Lucia. We're currently working on the national policy for older persons. We're in the final stage of consultancy where we have to meet with a few older persons in the various communities just to listen to their voice and to hear what they want the policy to speak to. However, that policy is going to speak to the entire business of older persons, whether it be infrastructure, healthcare, education, community life, family life, legal aspects. It will be speaking to everything, but we do not want it to be a policy that's just coming from us, the professionals, but it's coming from the voices of the people as well, which are the older persons. Our responsibility within the unit also lies with communicating with the various units, organizations, both here and, well, nationally and internationally, to ensure that everything that is done within our country has the involvement of our older persons. When it comes to proper infrastructure, proper housing, buses, food, healthcare, education, retirement. So that's where our voice will be lending to ensure that the older persons are spoken to, that they're heard, and they have an input. We're not directly responsible for abuse of older persons, which would be one of your discussions soon. We're not directly responsible for that, but we play some part in referral process.
So I found it very interesting. The policy sounds very comprehensive because usually when we speak about older persons, we tend to focus probably on their health needs because we know as we get older, sometimes our need for health care becomes greater. Um,
Mhm.
the need for housing sometimes because depending on the life that was lived in the younger years, the financial aspect of it does not allow people to maintain the standard of living that they had prior to retirement and so on. So I find the list that you gave quite comprehensive. And interestingly enough, you spoke about education, and education is not something that we really speak about in terms of older persons. So, what exactly, as it pertains to education, will the policy be looking at?
Okay, so we're hoping that this policy speaks to a more life course approach of aging, where we can help our younger ones to understand the process of aging, to know that, hey, we can start to work on our aging process from young to make preparation in the way we treat ourselves, the foods we eat, our exercises, the way we treat our grandparents, our parents, etc. Because at some point, some of us will be blessed to reach that beautiful ripe age of 65 and beyond. So when we speak of education, we speak of starting from the school, starting from the learning of that aging process, and also too when our older persons become retirees, that they're not just packed in a corner, but the teachers, the educators, the finance persons, they can give back to the various communities and educate the younger ones.
Okay. I was thinking in terms of continuing education actually for older persons. So, there are people who want to maintain some level of, activity to stimulate them mentally. So they may decide they want to do a course, they've always wanted to learn a language, or they've always wanted to learn a certain skill. Is that included in the policy in terms of making resources
Yes,
available for
making
that?
resources available. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's conversations that we intend to have in the very near future, but we're hopeful to get the policy legislated. So after the policy is legislated, then we can go with our Bible, which would be the policy, to be able to help us speak to those various aspects.
So the consultation with the older persons will be taking place prior.
Yes, some of which have been taken place with our consultant, Dr. Edmond. She has started, but considering we're in the final stage, we just want to wrap up with more communication, more information as to the foresight for the older persons in the policy, and from them, that is, as well.
So how are the older persons being uh, consulted? I mean, is it community engagement? Is it community engagement? Are you going through various organizations to have that
Well,
consultation?
yeah, yes. We're not doing anything in isolation. So the plan is to have discussion with the social transformation officers, the community gatekeepers, the community council men and women, to inform us as to which communities are the best suited ones, the largest communities with the more older persons, and the challenges that they face, what they're looking for, and to really help us set up the conversation to hear their voices.
Okay, wonderful. So all communities will not be engaged.
No, because
All
some have already been
districts.
in this, yeah, districts.
All,
Yes. Yes.
so
Yes, we
all
have
the
districts and
districts will be
communities. Yes,
engaged.
yes. No,
Yes,
not all, and
not
some of them
all.
have already been engaged, but in the final stage, not all. It will just be some.
Okay. Uh, w- will we be looking at? I know you spoke about the communities where there's a larger population.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that you may include some with a lower population who may actually have challenges which are different from the highly populated districts and communities?
Yes.
Yes.
Hence, I said we're not going to be doing it in isolation. We've already started the conversation with the social transformation officers. It's just a matter of having full discourse for them to inform us as to which ones are best suited. Because they're the ones on the ground. They know, what's happening with our older persons. So they would be the ones to advise accordingly.
Okay. I think that's a very interesting way of going about it. And I hope that when you do get to have those consultations and the engagement with the older persons, that they will actually not be shy about sharing what their challenges are. Sometimes people get a little intimidated. What their challenges are, what they would like to see done differently, so that it can actually be incorporated to a certain extent as much as possible into the policies. Because the rest of us coming up who are not quite there but soon will be there,
But
we
yeah,
would like to know
yeah.
that we are well represented so that,
Then
because
that's the hope.
we
That's
get
the hope
there,
as well.
policy will already be in place.
That's the hope. That's the hope that they would speak loud enough so we can hear the voices, get the information to ensure that we go back to our drawing board and look at what we already have vis-a-vis what they're sharing with us to make sure that we're on the same page as they are.
Exactly. And that is a
Because it's our business too as younger persons, like you said.
yes,
It's just going to
absolutely.
speak for us.
Yes. And that's quite a huge undertaking. So I
Yes, it's a lot.
I wish the unit well, the small unit well.
Thank
I
you.
and
Thank
I know
you.
there's a lot of pressure when you go into that sort of undertaking. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody is out to critique and to say what was left out and what could have been done differently. And that is what consultation is about. So when you get the opportunity, to everybody who is being consulted, I hope that they realize that the consultation is meant to give the feedback that would allow the policy to be shaped in a way that would be
Yes,
relevant
'cause
to older persons.
yes, because we've had some major consultations with representative from the various senior homes, from the retirees association. We've met with SSDF home care personnel. We've met with a number of stakeholders, including from the various ministries and other organizations, to really lend their voice to understand what they can bring to the table to speak to the policy. Because when that policy is legislated, then no ministry, no organization, no stakeholder will say, hey, we were not part of it. It's your business. You provided us with that information, and this is what we came up with. And even before we get the policy out for legislation, we will send the final draft to them to ensure that their voices are in there.
Okay, wonderful. So, do we have a time frame within which you're expecting to conclude or to end the consultations and to put the final touches to the policy?
As a unit, we have our timeline. We've spoken of our timeline, but that would need to come from our head, which is our permanent secretary. Yes, because our timeline may not be the same as the permanent secretary. So yes, we have a timeline sometime before the end of this year, but our head would be the one, our PS or our minister would be the one to speak to that.
Okay, wonderful. So it's not something that is expected to drag for the next 5 years, basically.
No, 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 not at all, because that's a policy that has been in work with our sister ministry, Ministry of Equity, from the first draft was in 2003, then the second draft again in 2012. So this one, we don't want it to be a draft that sits on the desk because we need to speak to it. We need to use it as our Bible. So we hopeful, like I said, from our unit, we're looking at before the end of the year, if not before. And then our PS and minister will give the final say as to when this goes into parliament to be legislated.
Okay. That's a long time.
Yes, because it's
2003.
a lot of yes, it's a long time. It is. But we're trying, we were not going to be sleeping on it. We're
Okay.
not going to.
That's wonderful news. Now, the other thing is that, it's very important, I guess, to get it out because our population is an aging population, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
It
So
is.
quite a few
Yes.
people we're getting older and we're not replacing at the rate that we should necessarily be replacing, as in the birth rate. So,
Yes, that's not happening. And in our last census, 2010, we had a very huge number, about quarter of the population of older persons. So you can very imagine now, from 2010 to 2025, with very low birth rate, it's even more.
so that 25% would be 65 and older.
Yes, it would be.
So the percentage within between 50 and 64 would be interesting to know, because that means we're very close.
Yes, I think, and then we're going to be the
Increasing
ones, we're
that
going
even
to go up to that figure. Yes,
yes,
yes.
declining. Now, I liked something that you said earlier about the life course, because many times, or very often, people tend to focus on working towards retirement and then enjoying retirement. So you work, you run your body ragged until
Mm-hmm.
60 or 65, if you get there at all, because you know the trend, it seems to be that quite a few people are not making it to retirement age. Also, that some people become, or they develop health issues very close to retirement or immediately
So
after
retirement.
retirement.
Mm-hmm.
So the approach that we take in terms of a healthy lifestyle, preparing the body, because we're aging from the time we're born.
Yes.
So the approach that we take really has an effect on
On
how
how we yes.
how we are as older persons, particularly as it relates to non-communicable diseases,
And mental health.
and mental health, which which is very important.
Yes.
I think we have this idea that many older persons just naturally at some point, as we say, they'll go senile. Is that inevitable?
No, it's not.
Right into something else. I know. Is that inevitable? And
It's
what
not inevitable.
is the research
We
saying
we
about
call it we call it senile, but it's really not senile, and that's a wrong term to use, though. That's an offensive term. It can be the dementia or Alzheimer's diseases, and that comes from a variety of things. That comes from stress. That comes from lifestyle. That comes from traumatic situations. And for some people, especially those who have retired, you see some people after they've retired, they become very isolated. So what they're accustomed of doing in their work life, they now are just there, idle, not doing anything. So it plays on their mind, it plays on the brain. The neurons does not travel through the brain as it should, and that causes all types of mental health challenges like dementia and Alzheimer's. And if you plan, like you said earlier, if you plan in the sense of preparing yourself, okay, so you have this many days a year of vacation. If you say, okay, fine, I'm going to take half of my vacation, do something fun, engage with my family, engage with my children, take a trip, do some gardening, just get the brain and the mind working. When you get to that age, then if you have to develop dementia or Alzheimer's, it will take a longer period than actually just when you retire. If you make yourself active, spend time with family, spend time with friends. So when you retire, then you say, okay, fine, when I retire, this is what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do, this would be my plan. And you work on it. And you have the support of family, friends, and community, then it'll be a little more difficult for you to become idle and mentally stagnant to develop those type of diseases. Instead of leaving all the money there and all the days and not doing anything for yourself and with yourself and your family, and then you just go and you become idle.
I guess
The brain cannot.
all the days, for some people it allows them to live to get a lot of pre-retirement leave or to be out of work before the actual retirement for a period of time.
Some people don't even get that. They end up falling sick. The bodies take a toll. The brain takes a toll. The mobility takes a toll because you've been going, 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 and when you stop, that means there's no movement, there's no activity. So you just collapse, meaning that your muscles collapse, your brain goes much slower, and you don't have the energy or mental capacity to do much.
Fair enough. There's something you said that I want to go back to, and
Hmm.
it's two things actually. At the very
I'm
beginning,
saying too
you
much.
talked about, pardon?
I'm saying too much.
Oh no, it's wonderful. At the very beginning, you talked about education, and I think that really highlighted your point about education. When I said senile, you said no, that's an offensive term. So you see why we need to be educated about growing old and older persons, even the way we refer to older persons, the way we refer to their experiences, their illnesses.
Mhm.
A lot of us I mean, these are just the words that we use, and we don't even realize that they are offensive or unacceptable. So that really, really demonstrates the importance of education.
Okay. Hmm.
Education. And I appreciated that. I appreciated you
You,
pointing that out.
yeah. You don't say that they're senile. They're not senile. No.
but
The
but you
mental health
But
is
you do
just being
acknowledge
disturbed.
it is very commonly used in Senusha.
Yes, and as a child, yes, that's the term I knew.
We
But I
rarely
guess being
hear
able to understand
Alzheimer's
it,
and dementia.
it's only now and we still don't have statistics. We see a lot of people with the symptoms, but it's either the families are not interested to taking them to get properly tested to get properly diagnosed to ensure that hey, this is what this person is experiencing. I mean, dementia and Alzheimer's, they're not reversible, but the growth can be targeted. If you take the person to the doctor when you see the signs and the symptoms, the doctors do the assessment to ensure that this is what's happening, following the rollout of medical, then there is medication that can tardy the progress, tardy you from getting aggressive, from getting ambulant, from roaming, all of the various heavy negative symptoms. The medication can help tardy that. But if we don't pay attention and just say, you have here,
Yes, and it's
so
just in
you have to you have here, say, let's have we pet but then that's what we do. But if we pay attention closely and do what we must as a community, as family, then we catch on a little and tardy the progression of it.
Is there a specific doctor with that we should visit or take the patient to, or is it a general practitioner
Okay.
in St.
First
Lucia
of the
in terms of
we
getting
have
that correct diagnosis?
Okay, so like I said, medical has to be ruled out. So you have to take the person to a general practitioner to rule out medical, do all of the blood tests, etc. And that general practitioner would refer them to a psychiatrist. So the persons can visit the mental wellness center or Dr. Julius Gillard at the Tapia Hospital.
Okay.
I mean, some persons are not comfortable with going to the mental wellness center because of the stigma attached. And if they can't afford, they would go to a private doctor, which is Dr. Gillard, who can even do a house call if you that uncomfortable with taking your parent or your aunt, uncle to a psychiatrist.
So they have two options. They have the
Yes,
private at
private
Tapio
or
and
mental wellness center.
the mental wellness center.
Yeah, yes.
Do you think it is a service that is used a lot, that people actually take their parents or the older relatives in to get an assessment, or do you think that people even know that an assessment can be done and you can um, as you said, not reverse, but at least slow down the progress of the disease,
Mhm.
of the diseases, because a group of diseases. Right?
I'm not sure if persons are well informed on it. I would be honest to say that. And for some who are well informed, they either not very much interested or the stigma attached to those type of mental health challenges. They just figure leave my mother, my aunt at home, or my father, my grandfather, whomever, and we will just deal with it at home.
Mm.
But I don't think persons are using the service for that reason very much.
Okay. So when it comes to stigma, I wonder how you would find it to be more of a stigma to take them for care as opposed to leaving them at home and having to deal with who's having caped.
I think it's a societal thing. That's how we've
Just
that's how
accept.
we've been. That's how we've been. We just accept. Again, like I said earlier, you're getting older, you're 65 plus, you start to do and say strange things, and then your children, your friends, your family would say, Ihalas ay hakapetetli, sepan ekive, as if it's acceptable.
Pardon? Go ahead.
Like it's acceptable. So we just leave it alone.
Okay. The other thing too that came to mind is that in as much as we talk about taking a relative to the doctor, we also have to respect their wishes. So if you have a conversation, if you have conversations with them and tell them about, the possibility of slowing down, because many of them, in spite of certain symptoms, the early symptoms, they are still uh, able to make certain decisions for themselves. And if they refuse, I guess we have no choice but to respect their decision.
Not necessarily, though, because there's a level of coherence. And if you recognize that this person is not very coherent, it's your responsibility as a family member to take charge.
So that would be when the symptoms are a bit
A bit
advanced,
heavy, yes, a bit advanced, yes.
not the
You
initial
have to
stages.
no, because the initial stage would be a one-off, maybe a few times within the month you'll find that odd behavior, that odd thought, etc. But if it's something that's almost very constant, like on a daily, they would forget where they put something or accuse somebody of something or get up to go to the bathroom, but use the bathroom in the sink, that sort of stuff, then you know that the pattern is different, the pattern is changing. So you have to catch up on it and take them to the doctor.
And
You tell
sometimes,
them, they may not understand that, hey, I'm you taking them to the doctor because of, mommy, you're behaving a bit different, you're doing this and you're doing that, which it's not usual behavior. And they would say, "Tipayeki vemwe mo just questions fair," that sort of thing. But you know the patterns, you know how they've behaved or acted in the past. So you have to actually take the responsibility to deal with it.
is it possible that the signs can be missed?
By the by the older person or by you, the relative.
By the relatives.
It can be missed, but you have to pay attention to your family. If you're too busy, you can miss it. You leave at 6:30 in the morning and you come back at 8:30. On a weekend, you still have a second job. So you can miss the signs, but then you have to find some way to pay attention. Either if that person has a carer or the neighbor, they're close to the neighbor could tell, I see your mother doing so and so, but that was looking a bit strange to me. You must watch her and, talk to her about it and listen to what she says, and then you can try to deal with it. But yes, the signs can be missed. Depend on the level of care that the person is receiving after they've retired or in their old age.
Okay. So another phenomenon is older persons living alone. Living
We have a
alone.
lot of that.
Pardon?
We have a lot of that.
Yes. So in that case, I guess it would be very easy to miss some of the signs and symptoms if they are not frequently visited or there's no one really checking on them. And in that regard, sometimes we talk about it. we're going to move into the abuse. So is that something that would be considered neglect? To have an older person living alone and not having somebody check on them, on a regular basis.
Yes, it's some form of neglect. If you cannot, as a child, and some older persons don't have children, but as a
Exactly.
cousin, a niece, and so on. So if you can't, then that's where you ask for help from the community. You try your best to come. If it's every 2 weeks, you can come. Say they're living in Digashozel and you're living in Grosley because you work in Castries. But Miss Anne and her children are close by. You ask them to check for you if anything, give you a call if she needs this. Okay, here's so and so amount of money, that sort of thing. Do what you can for her. I will be coming in the next 2 weeks. However, if there's something that's needed before or something is happening, let me know. You make the phone calls to check up on her or him to see how they're doing. Yes, it's a form of neglect, just leaving them alone. However, in some situations, it cannot be helpful. It cannot be helped, sorry, because they basically have no living siblings, no living nieces or nephews, no children. So that's where they're at the mercy of the community. And that's where our community hearts, our community love need to come to ensure that, we do our best to make sure that those persons who are alone and who don't have anybody are cared for.
And would there be anything in the policy to deal with situations like this where they have absolutely no living relative who can assist?
We're hopeful that it can, but it's a case where it will be a burden on the state. It will be a heavy burden on the state. So we're hopeful that the policy can speak to some type of relative to take action, to take responsibility for that older persons. Because as much as you will not, like I said, you won't have a sister or child and so on, but a distant relative, there will be the exceptions where the state will have to take responsibility for that person. But we hope that it would not be the significant number of older persons.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is, that our society is so, in a way, I would say fragmented. We don't have that bond that used to exist before between family members and neighbors and communities. So it's really a big ask to depend on that in terms of taking care of people who basically have been either neglected or who have nobody to look after them.
It will be a task.
Yes.
It's something that we would have to put our best foot forward to try to piggyback on what has happened in other societies to see how best it can apply to us. It's where we have to get the help of the various other organizations and ministries to see how best we can encourage persons to care for older persons, whether they're family or not. So it'll be a task, but we're hopeful that we can get help from other organizations and ministries to really put that fight for the sake of our older persons and ourselves when we get to that stage.
Yes, because we're heading that way. So we're
Yes, we
getting
are.
some comments on our live here from Mr. Huggins, who happens to be your director, I believe. Yes. So he said
Yes, he is, Mr.
encouraging
Hart.
public spaces and intergenerational learning can help rebuild that culture that cares for older persons. So he's referring to the discussion we were having in terms of the fragmentation of our society and not having those bonds. So that is a big, that would be a really big task, as you said, to, and if it really has to be built on restoring that intergenerational learning, it will take some time, but hopefully it will eventually work and help to reduce that problem that we seem to have, because so many times you see people who and it goes back to what you said, about the life course. So the nurturing and all of that, not only what we eat, what we drink, but how we love and nurture, hopefully can help with
Mhm.
that. Because it's so often that we see people who have had, you know 5 children, 8 children, and it comes to a point where they are living alone with
Mhm.
all the children, although they are within the state. They're not outside of St. Lucia. There appears to be very limited, if any, um, assistance being
Contact.
provided to the older persons. So we really need to work on those bonds in terms of changing that situation. Yes?
Yes, it's where we hopeful that we can change the language of how you care for your older family, how you care for your older loved one. And like I said, it will start from the bottom up because we still have a lot of children, teenagers, and young adults who not comfortable with their grandparents. She's smelling, she's not nice, she's not looking good. I don't like her. I'm afraid of her. And
Really?
hey, as an older person, yes, we still have a lot of them who don't want to go next to their older grandparents or grandaunts because they're not comfortable. They were not taught to embrace that older person. They're not taught to embrace that old age. So that's why we have to teach them that, hey, you too will get to that stage. So you have to show them the love. You have to do things to make them comfortable. So we're hoping that we can get to that place where we start from the bottom up.
Yes. And I agree with you. It will be quite a task, but I agree with you that that will be a very important aspect of changing our current situation as it relates to, older persons being alone, being neglected, and so on. I would like us to speak a little bit about some of the other forms of abuse that, sometimes we just don't think that it's abuse, but it actually is. So I'm sure you
Hmm.
will, very briefly, because you see how quickly the time is going.
Okay, so we have financial abuse. We have, and that's something that happens a lot. So an older person receives their pension or their NIC, and their granddaughter, grandson, or even their daughter, sister, cousin collecting it, but yet not spending it on what they need to make them comfortable, or even getting public assistance from Ministry of Equity, what they call LEPOV. Like, some of them say, government pay more, government pay more. So they would get that and not be the one collecting it or not going through their bank account, but going through that joint bank account. And it's never been used for them. They would be hungry, they would not have running water or electricity, which would be the basic things that they would need to survive and have, very minimal food, but that money is not spent. So that's definitely a form of financial abuse. Not we're hoping, but the policy will also speak, the legal aspects speak to that, to be able to hold persons accountable for misuse of funds of older persons. We have emotional abuse. The way you speak to an older person, you have a bedridden person, you're caring for them, but because they're always soiling the bed, either with feces or urine, you start to shout, you start to quarrel, you start to say all of those, negative things towards them whilst you're actually doing it, but you're roughing them up and you're saying all of those things. That's emotional abuse. That plays a lot. That gives a lot of stress, especially if the person cannot do anything for themselves. That causes them to go into heavy depression and sometimes probably would cause them to mix with their various ailments and cause them to even pass away even quicker.
And I
Yeah?
think it's one of the forms of abuse that's sometimes overlooked, that verbal emotional abuse, because you find caregiving is a very stressful job. So you often
Very.
get people say, "Oh, me I ka ban me de outro réponse. Se ba ela I ka di moi." And they're frustrated and so on. and and they feel like they're doing nothing wrong. So it's basically they feel like they're in a battle with somebody who is an equal.
But that's why the carer needs care as well. The carer needs carers. So your sibling is caring for your 80 something year old mother who lives with your sibling. You don't live, but then you provide the financial assistance, etc. Ever so often, you need to take care of that sibling if it's to give them a day off, a weekend off, if they need something nice or fancy, or just to buy them a gift, just to help them emotionally. So in that way, then you have the soft conversations. I know mama, can be a little heavy, can be a little rude, can be a little disrespectful. But remember, she's a child again. Remember to be a little patient. Or when she says the things that we know she will say, just don't take her on. Just ignore her, go out of the room, just leave her alone. Because yes, that there will be the battle of the heads because it's two adults. You
Mhm.
don't want her to talk to you that way, and you will talk to her that way, and she will feel offended. Then she will tell you she doesn't want you to do anything for her because you're disrespectful and you're calling her and you so and so. But that's where you, the other child, or you, the niece or the granddaughter, the neighbor, or somebody can help by helping that carer get some time for themselves, so they can care for themselves as well to ease the frustration.
Yes, it can be very frustrating,
It
particularly
is.
for family members probably who have never, sometimes the bond in the younger years was not really there, but you find that you feel burdened to take care of her now that her or him take care of that older parent now, just because you happen to be the child. But let's say autant coup il a fouté moi, blah 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 blah. And sometimes it's almost as if there's a little bit of a now I can get you back
Or
kind of.
the story you get with more of the men, you hear the children say, "He pa jamais gade mwen. He never looked after me. He never gave my mother anything. So now I have to take care of him. Life fait souffert pour ça." And they do. They literally do. So
Yes.
it's something, again, we go back to education, is reminding persons, teaching them that, hey, you will get to that point someday, and this is how you would want to be treated, not the way that you're treating that particular older person. So you would be hearing a lot from our unit with respect to education, treatment of older persons, care of older persons, because if we care for our older persons better, then we will not have the high influx of health challenges. We will not have the high depression, Alzheimer's, dementia. Because remember, diabetes and hypertension, that also sometimes, if it's not hereditary, comes from stress. So if we care for them better, if we teach persons how to care for them better, then our numbers may go down in that area.
So in terms of reporting,
Mhm.
you you have noticed, for example, that this older person probably is being verbally abused or physically. Sometimes you give them 1 2 taps, you
Which
squeeze
you're
them,
not supposed to.
whatever it is. So you notice any form of abuse and you concerned about it, maybe the severity or whatnot. What is the
Mm.
reporting procedure?
So,
And is it always necessary to report? Because some people say, "Me say pa, yes, gade pou moun pou vini like pe to akabay moun," and that sort of thing.
well, as a concerned person, it depends on the relationship you have with the alleged abuser and the client and the older person. You can have a conversation. You have a conversation, you monitor, you see what's happening. If it's something that is constant, something that you see causes it's harmful to the older persons, you report it to the Division of Human Services, the intake office, where the social worker would be responsible to do some type of investigation. Sometimes you can do a mediation, but if it's something severe, life threatening, it has to be reported to the vulnerable persons unit within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Also, two, you can, if it is a carer from the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, the SSDF, you can also report it to the supervisors there for them to look into it and see what's happening.
So you have given three different areas where a report can be made, depending on the situation.
Yes.
Yes. So for those
On
of
the
us,
situation, yeah.
yes, depending on the situation, but you also give an alternative, which is to have those conversations, because sometimes before we
Conversation.
escalate, we actually need to speak to the caregiver. It may be, as you mentioned earlier, that that person is just frustrated and they need a break. So maybe you, as a concerned
Mm-hmm.
can provide that break that they need for an afternoon, for a couple of hours a day. Hi, Mr. Huggins, welcome. So give them that break to allow them to get back in control of their emotions and so on. Yes?
Yeah. Yes.
So we have a few comments here from one of our viewers. Miss Gloria Leon is saying, "Good morning. I'm watching with great interest from America. Sadly to say, gone are the days when a distant relative or a neighbor will look out for the neighbor." You know, when we were talking about that issue there in the society. Yes, what was just said is absolutely true about the younger people saying that they are afraid of the older, unwell, and unable people, the person. So I guess I'm one of those people who just did not know that that was a thing.
Yes,
So
it is a thing.
people are scared of the older persons. Okay, thank you so much for your contribution, Miss Leon. We appreciate it. Now, we will not delve too much into abuse as is because you've already given us some information. But what I wanted to know is proactively, because there's financial abuse. Now, there's something you said about the person collecting is not spending it as they should. Now, you have the other side of the coin, where you may have other family members who say, moi, pas moi qui joindre l'argent, c'est pas moi qui fait this, c'est pas moi qui fait ça. You understand? So it's almost as though whoever is collecting should bear the sole and full responsibility for the older person, as though that whatever they're getting from Les Pauvres is so significant that it can cover all of their needs.
It shouldn't be because it's your older parent, grandparent, father, etc. Like you said, the LEPOV, it's for some people it's just $215. You know what that can do? Absolutely nothing. Very little. Very little. So we're supposed to be responsible for our older persons. We're supposed to ensure that they have their basic needs and not depend on the little that they get, or whether it is I'm the one paying for the food or the bills, etc. And for you to say I'm not doing anything because she's already taking care of it. Everybody's supposed to be able to, in their good conscience, say, you know what, we have to do what we have to do to ensure that our
And
older person is being cared for. And we do have some families that everybody chips in. We do. But then we have a larger amount where the sole responsibility is on rests on one person.
rest on one person. Absolutely. And it can be quite a challenge sometimes for that person to maintain their own lives and to also take care of all the needs of an older person, particularly somebody who has a lot of health challenges. You have people who need to wear diapers, people who cannot take a bus to go to the doctor. You have to hire a vehicle if you don't have a vehicle of your own. So there are quite a few expenses associated with caring for an older person. And it
Yes,
really,
it is.
yes, it really means that people really need to take a little bit more responsibility. In terms of
Might I
preparation,
jump in and say something?
go
Can you
ahead.
hear me well?
Yes, I can
All
hear
right.
you.
So I was just saying that speaking to you spoke about the challenges and the expenses associated with caring for older persons, and we recognize that. And one of the things we're trying to do through our unit, through the Ministry of Health, through our policy, is to be able to strengthen the health services. Because we know that a carer, when you're caring for an older person, you have challenges in terms of accessing help, not truly understanding what to do sometimes and whatnot. So we want to be able to strengthen our community services such that all the support you need can be readily available, whether it is through a community health nurse, through your wellness center, or whatever the case is. At almost any time, you should be able able to have access to people who can come and help you, whether it's to dress a wound, whether it's to do a check. And we want to expand eventually to introduce things like telehealth. So doctors don't even necessarily have to be physically on the location. They can be able to check in on the client virtually through platforms like Zoom or just telephone calls or whatnot. Um, Basically building on things and using technology and other things that we can enhance and support the carers so that they have everything that they need to be able to care for the older persons within the household. So we're trying to expand and minimize some of those challenges you just mentioned there, so it's more seamless. You may be aware that we had the 80 plus program,
Yeah.
with UHC. That program will become a little bit different because UHC is basically going to ensure that most services that they would require will be free and covered under there. And we are working assiduously right now to ensure that these programs are available and that everything that they need becomes accessible, right? Meaning that it's affordable, meaning that it's within reach, and everybody can get what they need to get at the time that they need to get it.
And I think that would be very helpful for the older persons as well as the caregivers, because those are some of the things that add to the stress when it comes to caregiving. Making all of taking all the steps, doing everything that is necessary to ensure that the older person is well cared for. So it's one less thing to worry about if you know that medical care and so on is readily accessible. I like the fact that you mentioned the the use of technology and telehealth, so that you can probably make a video call to your DMO at the health center, show them whatever it is you're concerned about and get some advice and so on. So I think that would be very interesting to see how it rolls out, and I believe that it can very much help with the situation in terms of older persons being at home. Yes. So I will go back to my last question as the last question, Ms. Alcide. In terms of preparations for old age, we spoke a little bit about it, but I want to focus on reducing the risk of elder abuse. In terms of what preparations can we make in terms of reducing the possibility of elder abuse as we get older, as we become older persons. So you're 35 years old and living your best life. You're not thinking about at some point maybe somebody may abuse you in some way, whether it's to neglect you, to abuse you financially. And we talked about les pauvres, but there are also older persons who have a lot of assets and money, and they're taken
Right.
advantage of. So, what can be done to reduce the risk of those forms of abuse as an older person when you become an older person?
So you could never fully prepare yourself for old age. However, there are the steps that you can take by preparing for your retirement financially. So, like you said, example, 35 years or your late 20s and you're working, and if you're not receiving a pension from the government, and the little that NIC may give you sometimes is not sufficient, then there are other institutions that you can have pension plans with to prepare financially. You figure you're going to have assets, you're going to invest in assets, then you have your wills, you have your trust prepared. So when you get to that stage and you know who's going to. So even if when you get to 30, 55 or 60 and you're still very much of sound mind and can, deal with your business, if you figure that the person you had previously indicated to be entrusted to with your asset, you're no longer comfortable with that person for whatever reason, that's where you have the opportunity to rewrite, to get your will done over, your trust done over, to ensure that, hey, this is what you're putting in place for this person to take care of you, to ensure that you a little more comfortable in that old age. The basic abuse, like physical and some emotional or financial, we cannot always escape from it. But again, it's a matter of treating others well, taking care of your family, taking care of your children, in the hopes, and I'm using the word the hopes, because you will treat persons well, and eventually when you get to that age that you need the care and the love, they will not give it to you. But sometimes we, as young people, we reciprocate the love and the care that we get by treating our older family members with that same level of love, care, and respect.
So thank you for that response. And thank you for all of your contributions there today. We have come to, the end of our program. I'm very happy that you were able to join us. Very interesting perspectives from our gerontologist. I really like the fact that you are, because it's so uncommon. And I think it was a very good discussion. Very, very informative. And I hope that our listeners were able to pick up on some of the issues, as particularly as it relates to the policies and the importance of the consultations and so on, and what is planned in terms of making older age, making the life of older persons better. There's so many different aspects. It's so very comprehensive, and hopefully when it's legislated or after all consultations are done, we can have another discussion to go into more detail with it. I would very much look forward to that and would appreciate it. And I think our listeners would as well. And thank you to Mr. Huggins for joining us towards the end and for your contribution as well. Thank you to Ms. Gloria Leon for your comments. We really appreciate it. Thank you again, Miss Alcide. It was wonderful having you on the program. I look forward to having you on the program again. And I hope you have the same view that you will be here again. Yes?
I'm hopeful, yes. You're most welcome.
Okay. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us on 88.5 Soufriere FM for Casualty 911. We will be back with you next week, Monday, for another edition. Thanks again. Bye.